Are you tired of lugging around heavy, bulky tree stands, whether you're using a climber or a hang-on, and would prefer to hunt lighter and more mobile? If you said yes, then you need to check out the Tethered Mantis Saddle and Predator platform. For me, this setup has done a couple things for me over the past year and a half. I've definitely been more mobile, lighter, and when you get into those situations where maybe the wind switches on you or whatever, and in years past you didn't want to pull all your gear just because you didn't want to move it, didn't want to make additional noise and things of that nature, this kind of solved all those problems for me, and I'm able to kind of tear down quickly, make a move if I need to make a move, and get set up without losing a whole lot of hunting time. The other thing I do a lot more of with this is actually I'll still hunt my way through, or just kind of go into an area where I'd like to check out, scout with all my stuff on my back. It's super light, so I don't really even notice it, and I hunt to where I'm going, or I still hunt through to where I'm ultimately going to set up, which is a great benefit, has been a great benefit to me so far this year. If you're interested in all these things, then you need to head over to tetherednation.com, check out all their information related to saddle hunting, and release your inner tree ninja. First thing I do in the morning before a hunt is, of course, I have to have my morning coffee, and I'm sure most of you out there probably feel the same. Make sure you're filling your mug with Skull Brew coffee, as it is the only coffee company that is both 2% for conservation certified and, of course, donates 10% of their profits to conservation organizations who are helping us to secure the future of our wild places. So head to skullbrewcoffee.com and choose between 3 kilo roasts of coffee, and know that you are supporting conservation with every sip. All right, if you listen to this podcast for any length of time, you guys know that I am good friends with all the guys over at Exodus. And I want to give you a quick heads up that you should be checking out some of their content if you haven't already. They have a podcast out called Trail Cam Radio, and they release new episodes every Tuesday. So the day before you listen to this one, you could be listening to that one as well. They've done some deep dives with some great guests. You'll recognize some of these names as Jeff Sturgis, Dan Enfalt, and the Hunting Public. And they also jump into and talk to some less known hunters who consistently are getting it done many times on public land. If you prefer to watch podcasts, if you're looking for some video content, they have a YouTube channel as well, and that is packed, of course, with great videos and interviews. One of the most popular ones they did is a candid interview with John Eberhardt, and if you know anything about John, you always get the straight dope from him. And for specifically my PA listeners, they just recently posted a public land big woods interview with Steve Shirk, which I consumed, and it is pretty awesome. This dude's killing hammers and getting on giant deer in Pennsylvania, so it's absolutely a must listen. So if you're looking for more whitetail content, especially here during the course of the season, you just can't get enough. Be sure to head over to their podcast, Trail Cam Radio, and their YouTube channel, Exodus Trail Cameras, and drop them a subscription or review, and let them know that Truth from the Stand sent you. If you're also in the market for a trail camera, over the last 4 years, of course, Exodus has consistently showed they build quality trail cameras that flat out just work. Of course, the best trail camera warranty, period. Every single camera is backed by a 5-year warranty and even comes with a theft and damage coverage. That's right, 5 years, literally half a decade, you'll be covered by the Exodus 5-year warranty. But more than likely, you won't need it because the cameras are built to last. What's going on out there, folks? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing fine. Happy Wednesday to you. We're rolling into another podcast, and the season is rolling right along. I get a little, for me at least, the season opened up mid-September, and so this time of year, I'm looking at the calendar going, man, end of October starting to approach, our favorite time of year, for a lot of us. I know there's some of you folks out there listening that prefer to hunt October, hashtag Greg Litzinger. And I believe Johnny Utah actually even prefers to hunt October as well. But this time of year, I'm kind of starting to look at the calendar going, man, it feels like it just got here, and we're just a handful of weeks away from, things not fully wrapping up because we have late season and stuff like that. But it's really, the getting's really just about ready to start getting good here. It seems, I know last week when I was out, there were some scrapes and some sign getting laid down. And I think I talked about, I had a good encounter, over a set of scrapes, last week, which was super cool. And I have yet to get back to hunt that spot. I had some opportunities this week with that cold front that came through. Just didn't get a chance to get out. I was at work and just couldn't break away from the office. So unfortunately I missed all that. And then Saturday, when I had an opportunity to hunt, I had a wedding this past weekend that I had to go to Saturday evening. So I got a morning hunt in, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the morning, the wind was not good for me to hunt that particular spot. It's really that particular area is, unless I get just the perfect wind, I probably can't hunt it in the mornings. The access in it is somewhat tough, and it really only works for evenings because it's kind of surrounded by some agriculture. and the way you kind of access it is through that ag in many cases. At least what I understand right now, it's like my plan today. I'm actually recording this on Sunday, as I have a little bit of time here this weekend. But my plan today is we're getting some rain, and I'm actually going to go out and hit that piece because I don't know a whole lot about it. I've talked about it in the past. I found these scrapes where I thought I might find scrapes. I'd set up on it. I saw that buck that came in, and worked those scrapes while I was sitting, standing on midway up the tree on my sticks. And I've yet to get back in there. And so the plan is since I haven't got back in to hunt it, since we're going to get some rain, is to go in there. I'm not going to scout it super hard because I'm pretty sure I know where he's bedded. I think there's 2 possible bedding positions in this particular section of this public. And what I'm mainly doing is going in and I'm going to check and see are these scrapes still pretty active? If so, great. And then I'm going to kind of dive into what I talked about before, which is try to find the tree location that I want to set up in. And I really want to find 2 different trees because I can basically hunt this area on any type of west wind, and I can hunt it with a northwest wind or a southwest wind. It really doesn't matter. So I need to basically go in and find 2 trees, one that I can set up for a north and one I can set up for more of a southwest wind. East does not work. Any type of east on that piece is not going to work whatsoever. So those are really the wind conditions that I need to get. And I did get them yesterday evening. Would have been my best opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, to get in there, and it just wasn't in the cards. So yesterday morning, I did get a chance to go out, and I know I had talked about on this one swamp piece that I've been hunting, a couple of these deer that I wanted to kill have seemed to move on, which wasn't a surprise to me because the one piece of the swamp where I had pictures of them during the summer and early fall, it's the easiest part to access, which is why I was really kind of going in, being kind of aggressive in, September and the first week or so of October, because I knew eventually those deer were going to move on. Not due to like transitioning, because I got pictures of them after they went hardhorn and stuff like that. So I knew they were still in the area. And that piece of the public is the easiest to access. So I knew eventually at some point those deer were probably going to move on because there was going to be a lot of people there. It's the easiest way to get in. And so there's a really easy 2-track to kind of follow. And I knew it was likely going to move the deer to somewhere, and I wasn't sure where. And I talked about this in the last podcast in the upfront, where I went and scouted the other half. I bumped the deer that I was trying to hunt, or one of the 2 deer I was trying to hunt, hung a camera. So this past weekend was the first opportunity for me to really get back in there and try to put on a hunt. Had a really good wind for this particular setup. I had really good access. Access was nice and clean. Got to the edge of the swamp to where I could literally look across the swamp and I could see the other, one of the other locations I had set up on previously. But there was just, a small body of water that's nasty that kind of separates the 2 sides. And so as I was walking in there, I usually walk in with a red light. So, I'm not giving away my location. And of course, it's just a little lower impact that makes me feel better. I don't know that, I'm assuming deer can see the white light when I'm walking through, because it's a distinct contrast. So I like to use a red light when I'm walking in, but I could see other people walking with their lights on. Now they were on the other side of the swamp, so I didn't really care, because the deer I was trying to hunt, they weren't going to come from over there. So I wasn't too worried about it. So they stopped right along the edge of that swamp where I was at, and their wind wasn't going to bother me either. And then they started kind of trudging through the swamp, and I was like, man, what is going on? And so I flashed my light at them. I knew they saw me because I could actually hear them talking. Now they weren't being, trying to be quiet whatsoever. And I could hear them say, there's a guy in a tree over there. And so I assumed like their lights went out and I didn't hear anything for like a little while. And I assumed that they had just kind of made their way to wherever they were going to go, seeing that I was sitting there. Well, then, it's just about daybreak and I see them flip their lights back on. And now they're walking through the water toward me. So now it kind of dawned on me that they're deer hunting, they're walking across the swamp, which doesn't make sense because there's a couple different ways you could get in without walking across the swamp. And so I flashed my light again at them to let them know that I was there. And the lights kind of kept moving. They didn't come the whole way across. I wasn't sure what they were doing. And then they stopped and they were still kind of on the edge. And I was like, all right, cool. If the dude wants to hunt that other edge, that's fine. Like, he's not bothering me at all. His wind, his scent isn't going to blow over here. Like, we're good to go. Like, no problem. And we were only separated probably by like, where I saw his light was probably, 75, 80 yards. But as I said, there's a swamp between us. The deer that he was going to see weren't going to come from where I was at. The deer I were going to potentially see and we're hunting were coming more from the north and I guess the west side of the property, and he was on the east side of the property. So it wasn't, we weren't going to booger each other's hunt up at all. Well, we get to daybreak and I don't see the guy anywhere. I'm on my binos looking in trees to see if I can see where he's at. And all of a sudden I hear boom, guns going off. And then I realized that there was waterfowl hunters around this swamp, and they weren't the only two, but this guy happened to set up, when I finally found him in the swamp, he was set up 50 yards away from me, shooting in my direction, which was not a great feeling. So in the morning, I'm now getting peppered with BBs landing on me, as the duck hunter, that guy specifically, was shooting at my direction toward me. And it wasn't like he didn't know where I was at, because I let him know twice where I was at, and I heard him confirm that he knew where I was at, yet he still was shooting in my direction. So I guess the lesson here is that, we all have access to this public land. I ended up just getting down. Of course, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. And ended up just throwing my saddle and stuff on my back. And I started hiking through the swamp and found another setup close to this, doe bedding area, in general. Cause I figured, if nothing else, I'll just try to see if I can't, put a doe down. I would be lying if I said it didn't, if I said it didn't bother me, that, not the fact that he was hunting so close to me. That wasn't the issue necessarily. It was more the issue of just the lack of respect of I had already got there, set up, let him know where I was at. He recognized where I was at. I could hear him confirm that he knew where I was at. And then he still proceeded not only set up right on top of me, but then also shoot a gun in my direction. And we all have access to these public lands, and we're all thankful for that. But I would just urge folks to be respectful, whenever you're out there, when someone's in your, like, we don't own claim to any specific spot. It's a first come, first serve situation. And if you set up right up underneath of someone, knowing that they're there, you're kind of a douchebag. And fortunately nobody got hurt. Like, I didn't get hurt, as he was, of course I wasn't going to get hit with anything high powered. I was far enough away. But I, of course, didn't know where any other fowl, waterfowl hunters were at either. So I didn't know if there was anyone closer to me or not. This guy clearly didn't care if he was shooting in my direction, so I'd assume he didn't care if he was shooting at someone else's direction either. So there could have been someone right underneath me, no clue. So I ended up getting down, checking out another spot, setting up. I ended up seeing one coyote kind of blow through the bedding area. It came right underneath my tree. And so at that point, my hunt was kind of over between the waterfowl hunters and a coyote running through the bedding area. It pretty much killed any type of movement that I was going to possibly see. So I ended up just pulling my stuff and getting out of there, which was probably like around 10:30 or so, and called it a day. And then, of course, had a wedding in the evening. The real bummer of it, though, was that the camera that I had on a scrape on that side of the swamp, I had to pass it in order to get to the first tree that I was setting up in, the one that I was getting shot at in. And when I checked it, it wasn't like it was getting run over with deer, but I had pictures every day of bucks walking by that scrape. I didn't actually get any pictures of them hitting the scrape or checking it out. I don't know why. It's kind of weird, but they were all walking right by it, and it was all buck pictures. And there were two that were kind of, a buck came in from like the side and kind of was walking almost like almost dead away from the camera. So it's, the sensor doesn't have as much, body movement to pick up, because it's, picking up just the ass end of the deer walking past, at a distance. And when I pull it in, it looked like it was one of the two dudes I was after. I couldn't confirm. I could see frame. I couldn't see points or anything like that. And it looked like it was about the right size. So that was kind of like the big bummer, because I pulled that card, got up in my tree, had an adapter for my phone, and looked through it really quick, and was like, oh, awesome. I was like, he's coming, like he's been through here. At least I assumed it was him. He's been through here, and it's all buck pictures, so I know that I'm in the right spot. The only bummer is I think I need to move back, to the north a little further, because the direction they were traveling and the time that they were coming through, it's really probably going to be more of an evening setup. I didn't have a lot of not daylight movement, but morning movement in this particular area. So, I think it's going to be more of an evening spot if I get back to hunt it. And that's kind of what I'm playing now, is what places, what areas can I get back to set up in before I leave for Iowa. Because I really only have to the end of this month. So that means I really have this weekend and then Is there one more weekend? I think this might be the last weekend upcoming that I have to actually get out in the woods. Yeah, this will be the last weekend. I guess the 25th or 26th, 27th. And then I'll be leaving for Iowa. So that's why today, after I get done, recording this, why I'm doing it on a Sunday, because I'm going to have a lot of stuff I need to get done this week. I'm going to essentially wrap this thing up, and then I'm going to jump in the truck and head out to a couple places, check a handful of cameras. It's going to rain, so it should, clean out any of the places I kind of walk into, and then try to figure out what my plan is going to be for next weekend. Because it's really the last weekend that I'm going to have to hunt any of these deer, at least in the October-ish, November-ish time frame. As I'll get back and I'll have, a little bit of time as gun season will get ready to come in here in Pennsylvania there in later November. So that's really the plan today, is to get out and do a little scouting, see if I can't make a plan for next week, hit it, and then I'll probably be wrapped up for the most part here in Pennsylvania, at least until we get to the Thanksgiving time frame. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the meat of this show, which I have a cool show for you today. I have my buddy Josh Profit back on. Did a podcast with him a few months ago now, where we really talked about his strategy, his aggressive tactics to hunting public land. And what we talked about in that episode, and just in general, if you follow Josh on Instagram, is Josh kind of hunts a very large tract of public land in Kentucky, but he kind of hunts it like he owns it. He runs a ton of cameras. He knows every nook and cranny of it, and it's, several thousand acres. And he gets on really big deer. I think last year he ended up arrowing a 140 something, but he uses all traditional equipment. And this year he had a few true giants on camera, and that he was visibly watching, whether he was, glassing or whatever the case was, or scouting, whatever the case was. He knew where there were a handful of giants that were living. And when I say giants, I'm talking, some of these bad boys were, were boon caliber. And the unfortunate thing is they're in that area, or in his area at least, and I know in areas near where he lives in Kentucky, EHD had hit pretty hard in certain areas, and Josh was no exception, or his area was no exception. And when he was scouting, he's actually run across a couple of those deer that he had been watching for some time. And they were netting out, he ended up finding the skulls and stuff like that, and he was able to measure them, and they were netting out in the 70s and the 180 some odd inches. And so, basically his game plan at the beginning of the year was, he was going after these, this, particular group of deer. There were a handful of them that he was, targeting and going after. And what he realized before his season really got started, he had some early season hunts as Kentucky opens early, but he figured out pretty quickly that a lot of his deer that he was looking at, had been watching and following and been making a game plan for, were dying. And so, as he hit the meat of his season, he was forced to kind of reevaluate his plan and kind of start making a new plan to a degree. And I thought that this was applicable because, maybe EHD hasn't hit your area, or hasn't hit mine, of course, here. But we oftentimes make plans, with off-season scouting, which is great. And even when we get into the season, right, we're watching deer, and then all of a sudden the shift happens, whether it's, whether they're shifting their home range, because they go hard horned, or whether the food sources are changing, or whatever the case is. And we're forced to kind of adjust, right? You have it's like the Mike Tyson saying, like, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And it seems to happen to most of us hunters in a lot of ways, especially if you're hunting public land, because you're dealing with not just not just with the deer changing, in terms of their behavior, their biology, and them transitioning areas because of that, but the food that they're, that's changing on public. And then, of course, the hunting pressure that will, help enhance some of those changes. And so we're always dealing with that change. And I think, I've experienced this, of course, this year, where it's like I had a couple of deer that I knew and that I was on and I felt really good about. I knew I had to make hay early in the season, just couldn't quite make it happen. The deer kind of disappeared. And now the past couple of weeks, it's really been about making a new plan. And I would even go as far as to say, it's like I'm almost making a new plan on a weekly basis, and maybe even on a hunt to hunt basis. And that's a little bit what Josh talks about in this session, is how do you kind of go from having a plan and these goals that you set and you feel really good about it, and then all that kind of falling to shit within the first couple weeks of the hunting season. And then you have several months of hunting left to go, and you're starting back over from scratch. But you're lacking the the bulk of intel that you had previously. So that's what we're talking about in today's show. Appreciate Josh coming on again. Hope you guys enjoy. And as always, thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm joined by my buddy. You've heard from him before, the man, the myth, the legend, the whitetail prophet, Mr. Josh Prophet. What's going on, brother?
Man, I feel like you're giving me a little too much credit.
No, man, you deserve it, brother. You deserve it. I learn tons from you, man. Every time we text or talk, dude, it's like I feel like I got a little bit of a whitetail education from you, man. So it's I think it's well worth it. I don't know many people, dude, that find as big a deer as you do on public land, and that's even like buddies that I know out in like Iowa, and you're doing it in Kentucky. And I know you got some good deer down there, but in comparison to some of those other states, like you get into some monsters, dude. So I'm always envious of your ability to find good deer.
Man, I really appreciate it, and I'm humbled. I'm really just out here having fun. So at the end of the day, I'm either going to find them or I'm not, and it doesn't bother me either way.
Right. No, I hear that. Well, that's probably like part of the reason why you do get into them, man. It's like, I know you're a serious whitetail hunter, just like all of our buddies in it, but you have the way you kind of approach it. It allows you to kind of, I guess I'll put it this way. There's been plenty of years where I put a lot of undue pressure on myself to try to make something happen or whatever. And those were the years that I was just absolutely miserable during the season. And I just had to stop and be like, man, what am I doing to myself? You know what I mean? Where like, this is supposed to be fun. And I'm almost, loathing the moment that I'm walking out into the timber because I just have a bad attitude and a bad mindset. So I've definitely, taken some tips from you and some other buddies to where it's like I try to have a positive mindset and know that whenever I go to a setup that, I have confidence in the setup, that I've done my homework and stuff like that. So I appreciate, you passing those things along for sure.
Oh yeah, man. Positive vibes all the way on my end.
Right. The one thing I picked up from you, man, that I know I started using this year, and it's like I had been doing it, but I didn't really recognize that I was doing it. And the last podcast we did, we talked a lot about just hunting pressured deer, and we'll get into our topic today. Or hunting pressured deer on public land or aggressive public land tactics. And you talked a little bit about just trying to find good deer, right? And that you're really looking for areas in which mature deer want to spend time. Whether that's a terrain feature, a food source, a type of habitat or whatever the case is, and not hunting a specific deer per se, but hunting mature deer in the aspects of a piece of property that mature deer want to spend time around. And I actually adopted that too, to where I'm hunting more terrain features, and those actually even have been my camera setups during the summer and into fall here, that I focus on those areas. And lo and behold, man, it's like I'm getting more mature deer or better deer on camera, and I'm getting them more consistently. And I'm not focusing on a single deer, but just like trying to hunt good deer and focusing on terrain features that good deer want to use. And I kind of credit you for that, because it didn't really click with me until you and I were talking on that last podcast, and you had mentioned something similar. And that's kind of how you go about it, right? Like you're really looking for those areas where they're spending time versus a specific deer.
I like stacking. I definitely stack my odds, and I always tell everybody, I can only hunt about 4 days a month. So, I hunt just like a coyote for opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to chase one deer when I really don't have the time to do it. So, I like to stack my odds as far as, one area or an area that's got the most bucks, and then I literally just hunt for opportunity.
Right. And then, and I mean, and the way you're able to do that, correct me if I'm wrong, is just like, man, you spend a lot, like if you had to divide up your hunt time versus your scout time, how is that kind of weighted in percentages? Like, is it 70% of your time is spent scouting and 30% of your time spent hunting?
I'm going to say 75 to 80% of my time I'm scouting. And, when I'm scouting, basically I'm cutting up the timber. I'm putting cameras out or checking cameras, but I run so many cameras, but the good thing about it is, like, number one, I got to scout out a good area for the camera. And number two, it's like just a constant scouting session while I'm running cameras. It's not running cameras to tell me where big deer are. It's running cameras for inventory and scouting and learning along the way. And that's just always been really, really good to me.
Right.
That kind of method.
Like, so at what point during like your whole, hunting life or whatever, did the whole idea of scout more than you hunt really click? Because I know a lot of people talk about it, and this is probably the first year that I could truly say that I adopted it. Like I made a commitment that I was like, you know what, I'm going to find more pieces this year. Because kind of what you're saying, it's like I wanted to stack my odds. I didn't want to be dependent on like a property or two properties. So I found a couple different pieces that I liked, tried to find good sign, and then I ran cameras on those pieces. I tried to find the best deer I could find on those pieces. That way I have multiple places to kind of jump around, to put some decent hunts on this year. So at what point for you did it start to click where you were like, you know what, scouting more actually makes me a more efficient and better hunter at the end of the day?
Man, I wasn't killing anything, and back then, I was able to hunt a lot more. So basically, I would just go into an area, and it would look good. I'd be like, man, this looks good in here. I could see, a deer coming through here, and I would hang and hunt, or um, just spend a lot of time hunting. And it just, man, it took me forever to kill a deer. Then it would take me a couple, 2 or 3 years in between to kill another deer. And then, so when I really started to break the timber down and really cut up the woods and get the boots on the ground, so I would go into an area and, it would look good, but then all of a sudden I would try to figure out why it looked good. Okay, does this just look good or is it really good? Okay, so if the deer's bedding here and he's feeding here, where do I need to be? Or does this just look good to me and the deer are really not here? So until I really started wrapping my head around like why the deer were using it, it never worked out good for me.
Right. Yeah. I mean that the question why it's funny because, all the guys I get a chance to talk to, there's a couple different things that like all you guys have in common, which is the like super detail oriented, right? It's like the smallest things are what, guys like you are picking up on. And then, always asking the question why. Like nothing happens in a vacuum, right? And that's one thing that I try to adopt more and more. I'm still not there on my details. I don't think, there's guys like, the Don Higginses of the world and guys like that keep journals, literally writing journals while they're in a stand. Like, this is the wind direction today. I saw a deer do this. It's like, I'm not there. That's like some next level. I mean, do you do journaling and stuff during the hunting season? Like, are you keeping those kinds of notes on stand locations and stuff?
Man, I do. I pack a journal with me. It seems like all the smart people read and write, and I haven't got the reading part quite down, but I do write. I do write a lot, and it stays in my pack. So I do keep a journal, and I do look back on it, and it does help me out for sure.
That is the quote of the day right there. All the smart people read and write.
That's true, man. But if you can go to the woods, man, I like to call it the 3 W's. If you can ask yourself like when, where, and why, like, man, those 3 questions really answer a lot when you're standing there trying to break a piece down. Like, okay, so when is the deer coming through here?
Mm-hmm.
Why is he coming through here?
Mm-hmm.
And just trying to really break that down. And, sometimes you can't figure it out. So if I can't figure it out, and I'm just guessing, like, I'll move on to the next piece. But if I can figure out, like, okay, where's he coming through, why, and what time, like, that just really gives me the confidence to sit. Right. And, man, it just – I believe more in quality sets than I do quantity. And I haven't always been that way. But, and it's definitely – for me, it's definitely a better way.
Yeah. Like, no, I agree with you. Like, and that's something I've started – kind of doing. There's one particular area that I'm really into hunting this year, and like the other thing that I'm doing to ensure the quality is that I've wanted to go in and I've hunted this spot once so far since the season opened. Like, at this point, roughly two and a half weeks ago. I had a good wind. I got in and out really slick. Didn't booger anything up. He didn't show. It was just a real early morning hunt because he was showing me he was killable in the morning, and I didn't see him. I had to go to work, so I pulled out. As soon as the wind started switching and starting getting funny, I got out of there before I blew anything up. And I haven't been back in there since because I knew that there was a front coming. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to wait for that front because the wind I need is on the back end of that front. I was like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait and hunt it that day because that'll be the best day, the best conditions for me. And so I did exactly what you said. Like, I knew where he was coming through. I knew he was going from bed to food, and I figured out that he had wind-based bedding basically to the east. I'm sorry, to the west of where I was where I'm set up or where I was catching him on camera, and I knew that he would only use a north wind in the morning, and that would be the only time he would travel through that area in the morning. He would travel on a west wind through that same area, but he would only ever do it at night, and those are the only two winds he would use. And so once I kind of put those pieces together, that's when I was like, kind of what you're saying. It's like it gave me the confidence to go, you know what, I can hold off on him and hunt him when I get the opportunity, because, other than those scenarios, I don't think I'll see. I think I have a zero chance of seeing him other than that setup. Right. So, man, I was reading something, and we'll get into our specific topic here in a second. But I was reading something where that you had written down. I think it was on your Instagram page, where you had a 200-mile scouting goal. And I wanted to ask you, where did that come from? And is that for the entire year, or is that in season, or is that off season miles only? So what's the time frame for those miles?
That's from January to January, because I don't, some people know me and some people don't, but I can only go out about 4 days a month. And I've realized, like last year, I got about 150 miles in between shed hunting, and I didn't get to shed hunt very much. So most of my time was spent cutting up land and running trail cameras. That I did most of my scouting and put the 150 in, but I just learned so much more. And public wise, speaking of public land, man, the deer, they tend to shift, and man, when you really get the boots on the ground, man, you learn so much more walking around than what you do sitting in the deer stand.
Right. And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I did 150 last year, and so I decided I was going to try to up it to 200 this year, because it seems like every year I've upped it, man, I've done better every year.
Nice. Yeah. So I'm going to actually steal that from you this year. I don't know that I'm going to commit to 200, but I'm going to make a mileage commitment and see if I can hit it. Cause it just made sense to me, right? Like whenever I saw that, I was like, that's a great idea. I was like, cause if you just put the time in like that, walking through the woods, like exactly what you just said, it's like especially if you do it, right after the season ends, and try to prioritize putting as much time in during that time as you can to understand like what areas of the timber the deer are using. Now, what it doesn't help you do necessarily is learn what time of year they're necessarily using that piece of timber, right? That part of that comes from observation, like, during hunting season, or, scouting during hunting season. Like if you're not sure, what's going on a piece, put the boots to the ground and hit it and try to figure out where the hot sign is, but I was like, if I can just commit to do that in the off season and put a mileage marker out there, I was like, man, I think it's really smart. I could probably up my chances for for a better season, or better seasons as the years go on, because I'll just keep racking up the miles. But speaking of the season, man, how's Kentucky treated you so far this year? Just in terms of like, have you had a couple sits in? Any activity? What's the deal with that?
Man, it's looking like it's going to be, which I don't know. It's looking like it's going to be my worst season yet. I've set one time, it was opening morning. And going through right now, we're having, specifically where I hunt at, just a real concentrated, fast run through of EHD, man. It is just wiping the deer out. I've personally found right at 20. My two number one hit list bucks, I found both of them along with some other deer. So it's just kind of, it's not going good right now.
Right. That's like the understatement of the year when you're finding that many deer, man. And I know I saw some of the bone that you picked up, man, and those weren't any slouches too, man. I mean, you're talking about, how many of those do you think were pushing Boone?
Two of them were boners for sure. This last one I found, I think, is closer to 180. I got him cleaned up, and I'm going to tape him this week, but he's got 20 scoreable points, and he's just a giant 4 or 5 year old deer. And I mean, he's gone now. He's sitting in my building.
Right. What now, did you have some history with a lot of these deer, the ones that were, what you would call shooter worthy?
So typically hunting these big, large, vast tracts of public land and running all these cameras, there's very rarely that I don't have any history with the deer.
Right.
And the two big deer I found, yes, I have 2 years worth of history of them. I felt solid about the game plans I was forming for them, and it was literally in the process of trying to get the game plan wrapped around, cameras moved around, my mind wrapped around all this, that we have found them dead. So I'm not going to say the wind has been taken out of my sails, but it's definitely changing the way I'm getting the field.
Right, right. So, I mean, for the folks out there listening, this is kind of the topic that we want to talk about, because you and I started texting back and forth. I remember when I got that first text, the first thing I thought was that you ended up, one of your hit listers got hit on the road or something like that. Is initially what I had thought, and then you ended up, it piled up somewhere along a road somewhere, and then you were out to scout. You ended up finding the body or whatever. And then then a couple more came through, and I was like, well, one's like maybe got hit. You know what I mean? It's like after you sent me like 3 or 4, I was like, all right, there's like obviously he's got an EHD problem or something, and that's what you had said. And I said, what's your plan now? And you sent back one statement, and you said searching for leftovers. And
yeah, that's what I'm doing.
And I was like, dude, that's a great title for a podcast. And then it started my wheels turning, because I was like, you're going through this struggle with, these deer are gone, obviously, for, the obvious reason of EHD, but a lot of, guys and girls will go through either that exact problem, or they'll go through something where they have a deer that they're watching for a year, 2 years, or even just that, season or that summer. And then all of a sudden the deer transition and they're gone. And, it's like your season ends before it even starts. And so you have to kind of start sometimes from square one, and then try to either relocate that deer, or those deer that you've been watching, or you have to shift your focus and find new deer that maybe have transitioned onto the properties that you hunt, or find new properties or whatever. And so that's really what I wanted to kind of talk to you about today, is kind of how you go about, because you do scout like a madman. The places that you hunt, it's like, like every nook and cranny of that, those parcels. And so I wanted to get a sense from you, like what your game plan is. So I guess let's start with, you recognize now that these deer are gone, right? What's the first thing you're assessing, now that you kind of realize that, like, okay, I'm going to have to shift the focus of my game plan for this year. Are the areas that you've scouted in the past, like, in your opinion, do you still feel like they're viable, areas to hunt? Or are you back to kind of, glass in long range, to see if there's something coming out in the crop fields, to figure out what might be around an inventory? Like, where do you really start at?
So it's so extreme here. I feel confident saying that where I hunt at, I'm going to say we minimum lost 60% of the deer, but I feel like it's more than that.
Wow.
If I can go out and find 2 or 3 every time and the woods smell like death, just me alone, it's bad. And I think if you're smelling a deer off of EHD, it's less than a week over, because the maggots, man, they eat everything. They're gone.
Right.
They're gone in a short amount of time. So, I'm not giving up on where I'm hunting at. I'm going to give it through October. So I'm still running my cameras. I still do not have all my cameras out. So I'm still deploying them, and I'm still checking them. And in this whole process, I'm just not seeing what I normally see. So that tells me, like, it confirms, like, the deer really are dying.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was just kicking some information off a buddy, and I was like, man, it's like, it may work out this year and it may not, but, like, I'm not going to roll the dice on it. Like, you and I need to get a backup plan going,
Mm-hmm.
like, in case, this isn't going to work out. So currently, this Friday, which is a couple of days away, I'm going to go out before work and put a couple cameras out. And, I'm going to say about 2 or 3 weeks from now, I'm going to start checking all my cameras. And in about 2 or 3 weeks also, I'm going to switch gears totally and go about 2.5 hours the total opposite direction on a different WMA. I feel like that's my best option, is to right now to scout a new area, to put some cameras out, and mainly let the cameras do the work. Now, I do want to wait till the deer are leaving some sign before I step this new piece. It's over 10,000 acres. I've never walked it. So obviously I'm going to wait till the deer are really leaving some heavy sign as far as
Right.
scrapes and rubs. But I'm going to take 8 or 10 cameras with me. I'm going to put lithium batteries in them, and I'm going to throw them out on this new piece. I've been scouting for the last 3 or 4 days on Onyx from home,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to have a good idea of where we're going. But so basically, like, if everything looks like, if I feel good about where I'm at now, then, we're going to push forward. And these 10 cameras that I put out on this new piece, I won't check them at all until the end of the season.
Right.
And if it's not looking good for this year, then right before I take my vacation, because I hunt like a coyote for opportunity,
Right.
I will have already scouted one full day where the deer have left their sign, and I'll have 10 cameras that's been out for, a month to kind of give me the reassurance of, what I'm finding is true. So
Right.
that's pretty much where I stand at now.
Right. It's interesting, man. It's almost like you're doing an out-of-state hunt in state at this point.
It is, man. It is. And like, if you know me, I only hunt large tracts of land. When I say large tracts, they're not real big, 5,000 acres or more.
Right.
And I hunt it like it's my own farm. Like I feel like I literally own it. Like I talk to the biologist about food plots and deer density, and I run my cameras just like I would on private land. I hang my stands just like I would on private land. I literally get out there and hunt it like it's my own, but still stay respectable of other people.
Right. For sure. So so since you're kind of starting from scratch on this new piece, it sounds like, you're going to go out and get that day of scouting, and you're going to hang your cameras, and you're going to, if things go south, and it's just this, I don't want to assume they do, like, for your sake, like your home piece, if you will, but just for the purposes of our conversation, say you are going to make that move to that other piece, what will, so you put in the 1 day of scouting, you've got your 10 cameras out. When you head back there, when you say, okay, this is my best option, I need to see what's going on this piece. Like, well, let's back up for a second. When you're scouting, when you're on Onyx or whatever it is that you're using, what specifically online are you looking for? Are you looking for, specific types of topography features, and which ones of those do you specifically like to key in on? Or are you looking at for like, where you can like definitively see where there's an edge of habitat that occurs, like on the satellite image? Like, what type of things are you keying in on those places?
I'm definitely not a flatland hunter. I think it's a lot harder to kill a deer on a piece of flatland than it is hill country. So I like the hill country.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to start at food. Okay. And I always like to work myself backwards, because food is a lot easier to find than bedding.
Right.
And you can find the food from even looking on, you can find the food from your phone.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot find the beds from your phone. You have to physically go and find them. So, I'll start out backwards, man. I find all the food where I think all the food is, and then that's where I'll go in person. Then I will literally have 2 or 3, locations off that food, particularly points, the typical beast style hunting.
Right.
And I will go check, and I will literally go look for beds, or I will literally try to run the deer out of them.
Right. Okay.
That's how I work, and I'm not saying by no means I'm the best, and this is a very old tactic that's kind of mainstream right now, but it's very effective.
Right. So when you show up, obviously at this point it's going to be in season.
Oh yeah.
So, are you scouting any differently now that it's in season and you're specifically kind of, searching for hot sign, or do you kind of approach it the same way you even do whenever you're scouting during the off season? Is there any difference between the two for you?
No, man, it's bed to food all the time, and it's good travel routes all the time, man. If you can find a good food source and a good bed with a good travel route in between, man, it's money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really is. Now, I'm not saying that's kind of a harder thing to find, but
right,
man, if you spend enough time scouting or looking at your phone, like, you can pick out 2 or 3 areas, and out of them 2 or 3 areas, you can go in one, and you will really feel good about it.
Right. So when food starts to shift, right? I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, like when you say find the food, like online, are you mainly looking for, destination kind of ag sources, which you're going to congregate deer, and then from there you might validate some additional food sources that are in the timber as you go in to scout those where you think the bedding might be off of that food and kind of validate, okay, there's a couple oaks dropping here, there's a couple oaks dropping here, to kind of figure out where those staging areas might be before they make it to ag. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
That's exactly right. I run into that a lot. So I'll start at the ag field if I have them, and most of the places I hunt do have them, or the ag fields aren't very far off the property line. Sometimes I may not physically be able to see them,
right.
but I got the upper hand. I may fly a drone over there and see if it's corn or beans, and figure it out that way. But
Right.
I'll literally start there and work my way backwards. And a lot of times, man, like, if you got a bunch of acorns dropping, that can be your worst enemy. It keeps the deer so scattered apart, and they can literally be anywhere if there's a bunch of acorns. So that's one issue that I really, really run into is a mass acorn crop.
Yeah. I'm actually running into that right now on that piece that I want to hunt, that, that one terrain feature that the mature deer keep kind of using this one specific funnel, but that property has acorns dropping everywhere. Like, there's not a single oak on that property that's not dropping, and it just makes it, to your point, it's like, man, they don't have to leave their bed wherever they're bedding, you know what I mean? It's like they can probably just lay there and move, 5 yards in any direction and find plenty to eat at that point, which can make it, pretty challenging. So, I know you mentioned, you're running cameras and stuff like that. So, talk to me a little bit about, in this particular instance, I know you're putting these cameras out on this piece while you go and you do a day scout and stuff like that. What is it, that you're specifically, let me back up for a second. How is it you're specifically using these cameras? Are there certain types of terrain features you're going to focus on putting these cameras in? I know you like to hunt hill country. So is there certain elevation you like to use? Is there certain, will you put it in an oak flat if you find a secondary food source or whatever? And then what type of intel specifically do you look for? Are you running on video mode? Are you looking for direction of travel, all those types of things? Like, what intel for you specifically from the trail camera data really kind of trips your trigger?
Okay, so I like to get all of my cameras in between bed and food, basically, and I strictly run them for inventory purposes. Like, so many people ask me, like, do you run so many cameras? How do you not depend on them? And I just don't. Like,
right.
My scouting dictates where I'm going to hunt at. My cameras dictate which area I'm going to go in. So, if I got $5 over here on 600 acres, and then 2 miles down the road, I got $2 on 600 acres, I'm going to go where the 5 are.
Right.
Obviously, it's going back to me stacking. But mainly, man, like, I think we're going the third weekend in October to this new piece, and we're going in, and I'm going to look for. I've already got multiple locations picked out that I think deer will bed and deer will feed, and good travel routes in between. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to look for good, heavily used trails and scrapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm literally going to try to drop all these cameras on a good trail that has a scrape. So that way, I can get a good picture of a deer on the scrape. And then if the scrape kind of dwindles off, the trail is still there for me to back up on. Like, the camera's going to be working whether the scrape is there or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
So, and that's how I do it, man. And then, like, I'll go in and, I won't know right where to hunt by checking my cameras, but I'll know what deer are in the area. And because I've done my scouting missions from home or before, like, I have like A, B, and C, like, okay, I got these 5 deer. There's a good chance he's going to be here on this wind. If he ain't, then I'll bounce to B. Well, then he may be here. And then eventually you either connect or, you see the deer or he skirts you or, it's just a complete bust. I mean, nothing's never a guarantee. Just when you think you got it figured out, man, you don't. And that's why whitetail hunting is one of the best things that you can do, man. It's just, they're all different.
Yeah, man. I think that's the thing that I probably enjoy the most is just the unpredictable nature of it. You know what I mean? It's just, you have a great plan. It's like, like I think I have a decent plan for this year. You know what I mean? Like, I have a couple areas that I feel pretty good about. I have a decent deer for the area on. And like you said, it's like he could be No-Show Jones all year. You know what I mean? And, but it doesn't mean I won't be excited every time I walk in to try to hunt one of those spots. You know what I mean? Because my my scouting and my camera intel told me that I've done the work I need to do to put me, at least give me an opportunity. And now I just, have to see whether or not it all comes together. But I'm curious, man. I know you like to hunt aggressively just in general, right? That's, you like to, you stack the odds, right? But you're not going to wait for something to come to you. You're going to go try to make it happen. We've talked about that. But, do you feel like whenever you're in this situation where you're having to kind of make a plan on the fly to a degree, do you anticipate that you'll hunt even more aggressively, knowing that, maybe you don't have as much history with some of these deer or some of these areas, and things like that, to where you'll press the envelope a little harder? Maybe you'll hunt a wind that might be a little more iffy than you normally would, or maybe you'll press in closer to a bed than you normally would. How do you feel like you'll react in that regard?
Well, when you run that wind on a thread and needles is when you always do the best, because the deer's doing the same thing.
Right.
The crosswinds are a lot better than the winds hitting you in your face, because a lot of times when you're hunting these beds, or you're really trying to kill these deer off the wind, they're not dumb. That's how they live. And so you're really riding it on a thread and a needle. And I've always, man, just been super aggressive, over probably hunted public land like 14 years. So probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been super aggressive. And I just know, man, like there depends on which track you're on, but there's just so many more big deer than what people think on public land. So if you bump one and you're hunting a large track, you literally just go find him, or you move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of aggressiveness, just, man, I just feel like it really pays off, because I'm not one to sit back, and I don't have time to sit and wait. Like, I'm either going to try to kill you, or I'm going to run you out of there. One of the two. And sometimes, man, they don't even, it's overrated. Sometimes they do not leave.
Right.
I've had a deer see me and wind me and kill him out of the same tree the next week.
Yeah. I think people, look, they're smart animals, right? They live in that environment all year round. They know how to navigate it, but I do agree with you. I think people are a little how am I trying to say this? I think people think deer are more sensitive than they are, right? Because I think there's an element, right, to a degree. And I talked about this. I don't know if you know Greg Litzinger, or not, or if you know of him, or if you know him personally, but he's a good buddy of mine, good public land hunter. And we talk about this a little bit, and I think it varies on state to state, like where you're hunting. I think it's somewhat pressure dependent too, you know what I mean, to a degree, right? Because I know for him in New Jersey, if you might get 2 cracks at a deer if he wins you or sees you. You might see him one more time. He's like, but the second time, like for sure, he's gone. Like you're not going to see him again. He may not have left the county, but like you're definitely not going to see him in daylight. He's done with that noise. I think in certain instances, whether you're out in, some really good spots in Ohio, or good spots in Kentucky or Iowa, or some of these, states that maybe have a little less pressure, you might be able to get away with it a little bit more because maybe they don't see people as often. But what I will say is that if you bump them, especially out of a bed, and we've talked about this before on the show, it's like that bed you just reaffirm to them why they chose that bed. Like that bed worked. You know what I mean? Like they winded you, or they saw you, or they heard you, and they were able to escape. Therefore, that bed did its job. So why wouldn't you use it again if you remain safe in that bed, right? Do you think there's anything to that?
Oh, man, absolutely, man. And the thing about them, they're all different, so you don't never know how that they're going to act. But I've talked about this in like last podcast, and I'm fortunate enough, like a lot of these places I find, like I target in on them, that literally that like people are there a lot. Like they're either fishing or horseback riding, so that gets them, more used to people, and that way, the whole time you're bumping these deer, like there's just a big difference in bumping a deer that's used to seeing people on public land and walking into your private farm that's 1,000 acres and into the sanctuary and bumping your target deer. There's a big difference.
Right.
And I think that by hunting public land and because of the pressure, I definitely have learned use it to my advantage. When the parking lot's got 2 or 3 vehicles in it, it doesn't bother Josh Profit at all. Like, I go in there, I know what I know, and I try my best to get it done versus somebody that that would pull up that doesn't know a lot. They're like, man, this place is so overhunted. But in all reality, man, the deer are just used to them, and you just got to have to adapt and overcome and try to get them down.
Right. Yeah. And just gotta kind of know that you've probably done your homework, like, to a degree that not only someone asked me this the other day, because I said something, they asked me something about hunting, and it was someone who's a non-hunter. They were just kind of interested, and we were talking about it. And I said something about, I have a couple cameras that are set up that, yeah, I'm trying to watch deer or trying to find deer on those cameras, but I'm also setting them up in places where I want to see how people are getting in and out. And I'll set up stuff to watch people so I can kind of monitor what they're doing, so I can figure out where they're likely going to set up. That way I know, all right, that area I'm probably not going to want to use. And how is that going to change the deer? Like, what's that going to make the deer do? Where's the next best cover for them to move to, and then is there an opportunity for me to hunt that particular area, right? Or is there pressure over there? So I guess talk to me a little bit. How do you specifically use pressure to your advantage?
Man, deer do funny things. So the first thing I look at when I hunt a piece of public is access. Everybody asks me that, like, what do you look at? I look at the access, and I look at how people are going in. And man, just so many things are overlooked, man, and so many things are overthinked. Like, I went in, and somebody told me about a big buck that had busted them this past week. A mid-40s buck, right off the parking lot, totally overlooked. And man, I went in there in one time, and I'm telling you, I feel so confident that I broke that piece down, and I found that deer. I really do, in just that short amount of time. You can't overthink it, and you got to remember, like, why you're in there, and like you got to have fun.
Right.
Like, you can't go up in there. You can't get down on yourself because there's 10 people in the parking lot. You can't get down over yourself if you bump a deer. You got to look at it like, man, I found him. Like, I was that close.
Right. Yeah, I hear you, because I run into a lot of that, here in PA. It's pretty, a lot of hunting pressure around here. I definitely run into that in the parking lots where there's trucks or whatever, and I usually just kind of barrel into my spot, you know what I mean, or where I'm planning to go hunt, because I pretty much know that the spot that I've picked, like, no one else is probably going to pick, It was funny. It was just funny story was that the area where I'm kind of watching this one deer, and I got a pretty good setup for this one spot. My buddy was texting me the one night, and he asked me if I was out, and I said no. I said, I'm waiting for an opportunity at this one piece of public. And he's one of those good buddies that I share my info with, or whatever. We share, like, if he sees deer, I see deer. We kind of share back and forth, and he'll film for me sometimes, and I'll go in and I'll just film for him. I'll even take a bow and I'll just film him. And he's like, "Where are you going?" And I told him where that deer was at, and he was like, "No way." And I sent him an Onyx pin. And he's like, dude, I'm set up 300 yards from your pin. He kind of felt bad for like a second. And I was like, dude, don't sweat it, man. I was like, we're all good. I was like, you're not the only guy who's on that piece. You know what I mean? So I'm not worried about you walking in or whatever the case is. Like, that deer's been living there all of his life. And so he's had people walk through there all of his life. I don't think it's going to change what he's going to do. You know what I mean? Now, maybe if you were in the area that I was going to set up in and he busted you, maybe it'd be a different story. But, I ain't sweating, us hunting the same piece. That's not my worry, because there's going to be plenty of other people doing it. And I think probably over the past, like, 2 years or so, I've probably adopted more of that philosophy, because it used to really bother me. Like, I would get broke up about it, be kind of ticked off about it. But now I'm just like, I know where these guys are going to go, and I'm not going to be anywhere near where they're at. And I'm just going to use what they're doing. I'm going to get in earlier, because they're probably going to come in later, and they're going to leave midday, especially when we get to later October and November, the guys that want to come out midday. And I'm just going to wait for them to move the deer around. And I know I'm in places that are close to cover that they're going to want to get to. And so I just use that to my advantage.
Yeah, and I agree, man. I've always told everybody I'm normally the first one in and the last one out, and that kind of helps me, I guess. It's kind of a mind game, because I really, unless I get walked in on, which doesn't happen hardly ever at all.
Right.
Like, I don't ever see nobody.
Right.
And I think a lot of times, like what people do not realize, and I'm kind of gearing this towards public land because that's all I hunt. But like,
Yeah.
you really don't know how close you're hunting to people.
Yeah.
Like you really don't.
Yeah.
And like, and if you talk to some guys sometimes, like you'll realize, like, oh man, I can't believe we was that close. Like I hate to say this, man. I had a guy slip into 40 or 50 yards of me last year, and I never knew he was there till he was fixing to climb up the tree. He was being that stealthy. Now
Right.
he was on my downwind side. I wasn't really paying a lot of attention,
Right.
but he was being that quiet. And when he finally seen me, he got out of there. He waved at me, and he didn't know I was there.
Right.
And man, I really don't feel like he messed me up. I don't feel like he messed me up at all. He was hunting my downwind side. I still seen deer that afternoon, and when I got back to the parking lot, it was a good experience. It was still a good experience. Like he come back and he apologized. He's like, "Man, I seen your truck. I didn't know where you were at.
Right.
I'm sorry I come in there." And I'm like, I'm over that kind of stuff, man. I'm 34 years old. The Lord's going to bless me either way. So I was just like, man, it ain't no big deal. You didn't hurt me.
Right.
And so
then how can you get mad? I mean, he's got no clue walking in where you're at. You know what I mean?
You
It's
really
like,
don't,
no.
and I think if he maybe would have waved at me and climbed up the tree, there may have been a little bit of a tension there, but
Right.
It takes a really bad sportsman to do something like that. And that guy felt horrible. He didn't even hunt.
Right.
He told me, he said, man, I just went back to the truck and I waited for you to come out. And I felt kind of bad at that point because I don't even remember where he was from, but it was somewhere out of state.
Right. Yeah.
And, man, you cannot overthink this. You cannot take the fun out of it.
No.
And
oh man, it's one of the few things that we still have left that can be fun. You know what I mean? It's like we do a good job of pulling the fun out of nearly everything else. You know what I mean? On our own. I don't know that we need to. I don't know that we need to do that to hunting too. You know what I mean? So
no. We all have kids. We all have jobs that we probably deep down really don't like.
Right.
And it's all stressful, man. So why stress over shooting something as simple as a deer, even if it's a giant, man? Why stress over it? Like,
right.
just have fun, man. Just stay positive, have fun, keep your mind clear, and just go get it.
Yeah, and if you do those things, man, I think people will be surprised, like how much more. Well, one, how much more enjoyment they'll get out of it, and then probably two, how much more success they get out of it, right? Because you start to define success a little differently at that point. Then, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean, success is measured in so many ways. Like, I've had some deer that I didn't get to shoot that I beat them. I mean, I hands down, I beat them. I mean, I've had them right there. I've been hunting with a longbow for 3 years now. I had a deer last year at 40 yards for 20 minutes. We're talking 150-inch deer.
Mm-hmm.
He was dead. He was dead to rights. I beat that deer 100 times.
Yep.
He never knew I was there. He come right in on me. I didn't feel comfortable shooting that far, and he walked out, and he never knew I was there. That deer was beat. I might as well have killed him, but he's not on my wall.
Right. Yeah. No, I feel the same way, man. It's like there's some days, when you put all the puzzle pieces together, that's, to me, I don't know, man. Like, look, don't get me wrong. Like, I want to put a deer on the ground as bad as the next guy. Like, so I don't want to make it sound like that. I don't want to, achieve that goal. But there's been times where it's like I had a deer that I wanted to see. I had the encounter, just shot opportunity, whether it was a little bit of brush in the way or the instance you had there where it was maybe a little further outside of my comfort zone that I wanted to take a shot based on the terrain I was hunting in or whatever. And I'm like, man, that was it. I put the puzzle pieces together. Like, the strategy worked. You know what I mean? Like the strategy of it worked. I did everything except seal the deal, on it. And to me, in some instances, that's all right. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I get as much enjoyment out of knowing that I thought, how do I say this? That my thinking was correct. Like, I almost get as much enjoyment to know that, like, I thought through things the right way and that I was at the right spot at the right time.
Self-confidence.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And it just, go ahead.
That comes with a clear conscience, man. If you're stressed out or not having fun, then you're not going to have the confidence. And it's just like, when I shoot this trad bow, man, it's all confidence. If I'm not confident, I'm not going to pick my spot and hit it. If I'm confident, man, I I normally do really good, and I know I'm kind of going off on a little tangent here, but man, if you're hunting hard sometimes, whether it's public or private land, and you're just drained, there's a big difference in making mistakes because you've got sloppy
Yep.
versus making mistakes when you're really trying.
Yep.
And if you're making mistakes because you're getting sloppy and you're tired and you're wore out, man, sleep in.
Yeah.
Don't hunt that morning or don't hunt that evening. Like, get your rest, get your mind right, eat good, regroup, hit the maps, check
Yep.
a couple cameras, whatever you need to do, and go back out with a clear conscience and get after it.
Yeah. I mean, I know, when I was hunting with Chad there in Southern Ohio the one year, it was a tough hunt. I think the two of us, like, we saw 6 deer between the two of us in, like, whatever it was, 9 days, 10 days of all day sits. You know what I mean? And I forget what day it was. I think we were like 5 days in or whatever. And we were, going to go out the next morning, for another all dayer. And it just happened to be raining, and not like a little bit of rain. Like, it was raining. And we both, not like the kind like you're willing to go hunt in, like the kind like you're soaked between the time you get outside to the time you get into the truck, like you're already soaked. And like rain gear's not helping you in this situation. And we got up, we hit our alarm. I looked at him like out of one eye, and this is the year we were sleeping in. He had the Exodus pull behind trailer, and we were sleeping in like at the campsite in the trailer was what we were staying in those 10 days. And, rain's just pounding, and I get up and I look at him and I'm like, man, I'm not going out in this. He's like, yeah, me either. And I was like, dude, I'm beat. He's basically like, yeah, me too. So we hit the alarm, went back to bed. I think we still got up at like 6 a.m. or whatever. We didn't sleep in, too terribly late. We got up, it was still raining, and we just looked at each other. I was like, you want to go to town and get breakfast? It was like, yeah. So we just sat there. We talked about kind of planning out the rest of our days, you know what I mean? Like the hunts, like what areas we wanted to hit, like what we think was going on. Why weren't we seeing the deer we should see? We sat, we had a cup of coffee together, drove into town, had a good breakfast, came back, got ready, dude. And that was like 2 things. One, the hunting we had after that, like we were way more focused because we were like ready to get back in the woods because we had a chance to kind of calibrate, re-game plan, and then hit it again. The second thing was that's probably the most memorable day of that hunt was just like being able to hang out, have a cup of coffee, and chat with him. You know what I mean? So it was like that time we just got to spend and hang out and talk is like probably one of the best memories of that trip for me.
Exactly. I think we talked about that on our last podcast we did.
Yeah. So coming full.
It definitely left its mark.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, we still talk about that trip. That's for sure. So, man, where are you at now? Like, I know we talked about what your kind of plan is. You're gonna hit that piece. You're gonna hang some cameras, right? Do a quick day scout. Where are you at, do you think, in the process, mentally and physically of kind of making the plan? Like, I know it's going to like evolve as you get there and as you put boots on the ground and stuff like that. But, I guess give me a sense of like from the scouting you've been able to do this point and just like knowing yourself and like your ability to kind of cut up a chunk of timber or whatever. What's your confidence level going into this year, into this like new scenario?
My confidence is still high, but I don't know how to explain it. But I don't feel really good about it, but I don't feel really bad about it. It's weird. You asked me if I knew Greg. Me and Greg were actually talking today.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, through text, and I'm sure he'll listen to this, but like I really, really do appreciate the positive vibes he gave me because very rarely do I get down. And man, when you find, your 2 biggest deer dead, and every time you check cameras, like it's really hard not to get down.
Yeah.
And, like I said, I do hunt mainly one large tract of land. So, pretty much all my eggs are in one basket. Mentally, I'm staying positive, but I am worried physically. There's nothing that's going to stop me back physically. I mean, I'm in pretty good shape, but I wish I could tell you how my season was going to turn out, but it's going to be interesting because I don't know. I do know that I'm not giving up on where I'm hunting at.
Right.
I'm going to keep doing what I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. But I know come Halloween weekend, if something doesn't show up, or 2 or 3 bucks doesn't show up that I'd feel confident in hunting, like I'm going to pull and go somewhere else, and hopefully this new piece I'm checking out, it's over 10,000 acres. It only offers a 2-day gun quota hunt. That's it. So I feel like the potential for a good deer number of bucks 3 years old or older is there.
Right.
So I got a feeling that I'm going to be okay, man.
Right.
I feel like over the years of what I've learned and what I've done, and I think I can get out there in 2 or 3 trips and walk, 35, 40 miles easy. And I really do feel like I can get on some deer. Whether I can kill one, I don't know, but I really don't care.
Right.
As long as I'm having fun, that's all that matters to me.
As long as you're having fun and you're giving yourself a chance, putting yourself in the game, that's all you can ask for. A lot of years. I mean, I think that's a lot of, what folks can ask for just in general, regardless of where they're hunting. I had one question though, man, because I know you were talking about how you were gonna set your cameras up. Like you were gonna basically focus on heavy run trails that have a scrape on it. That way, whether the scrape is active or not, you're still gonna get inventory. Now, when you go to set up the hunt, and I don't know that I've ever asked you this, but are you a scrape hunter in general? And if not, or if so, regardless of what that answer is, will that be different this year based on having to kind of change, up your approach because you're going to a brand new piece and you're trying to dissect it quickly?
I'm not a big scrape hunter, but I will say this: from years and years of running cameras, and I've got I got over 40 cameras this year. If you can find a really good scrape line, and I'm talking like a lot of times this is on a ridge top or a logging road, if you can find a really good scrape line and you can hit that where you've got a good steady rain for a day or something, like them bucks, they really will want to come clear out some of them scrapes, without a doubt.
Right.
And so if all the stars were to line up and I did find a good scrape line, and there was a good rain, and I'd got pictures of a good deer using them before, oh yeah, absolutely, I would be trying to get my wind right, getting all around them.
Right.
For sure.
Okay. Now, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this next question. I'm trying to see here how to frame this. So you're not typically a scrape hunter, right? Is there a reason why that would maybe, I guess, would your mind change? Like, what would you have to see? Let me ask it this way. What would you have to see in order to change your mind? And then 2, what are you focusing on when you're setting like your specific, stand locations? Like, is there a specific terrain feature you're looking for? Is there a certain type of sign that you're prioritizing that you want to see to set up near? Like, what do those setups look like?
So my cameras, it all goes back to my cameras. Like my cameras, I strictly use them for inventory. Now, it would be different if I put a camera in a place where I was really dependent on it to try to kill the deer, which
Right.
I never do. So my camera, I just put it in a place where I really think it will have the best odds for taking the most pictures of the buck in there and general bucks in there. And a lot of times that's at night.
Right.
So, let's just say that I put this camera out, this inventory camera, and it's just stacked with bucks, and half of them are day or half of them are night. So I don't feel real bad about hunting over the camera, but I don't feel real good about it neither.
Mm-hmm.
So beforehand, I'm either going to have a place that I want to set because I've physically seen it,
mm-hmm.
or I'm going to be looking on a map like, okay, like even though I don't know why that they're hitting this big community scrape right here in this bottom, but coming off this point here is just nasty. Like this totally makes sense for the deer to walk right here before they get to that scrape. And the deer may turn and never go to the scrape, and they may, cut down this ridge and scent check these does, or this may be how they walk down. So that's where I'm going to be at. Okay. I very rarely hunt right over a camera.
Right. Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. I mean, it's so when you're finding stand locations, like you said, like you're using your cameras for inventory and stuff like that, but your stand locations are likely going to be where you think how to the set up in an area in which the deer would have to use to get to where your camera location was. I guess, what I was more kind of wanting to get at, like, is that usually like is that usually a saddle that you like to focus? Do you like to focus on saddles? Do you like to focus on pinch points? If there's field edges nearby, are you looking for a corner? Are you looking for a double inside corner? Are you, like those types of things? Is there something usually that you're seeking out in those areas if you can find it, or is it more when you have boots on the ground, you're just kind of letting the area speak to you and you're like, this is where I think I need to be?
Man, when I got the boots on the ground, I very rarely do I guess at it anymore. So I normally know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, like sometimes a lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense to me. Like I got one of my best cameras, man. Like I know where the deer are bedding in this private clear cut, but I don't know why they cut through this bottom. It still to this day, it does not make any sense to me. But they're there a lot. And so, what I'll do is, I am a topography hunter because it doesn't matter if it's the rut or not. Like these deer run these hills.
Mm-hmm.
If they live in them, they run them. And so you got to figure out that how your deer run your property. So, and then a lot of times you spoke about edges, man. Deer love edges.
Yep.
If you talk to any experienced hunter, they'll tell you like a deer will run an edge. Like he'll run the edge of a clear cut, or he'll run the edge of open timber where it gets a little thicker, or he'll run the edge of a field or a ditch line. So those are all things that I look at. Like the cameras down here, it's not the deer are there for inventory, but it's not making any sense why they're there. But up above it, they clear cut 400 yards away. They clear cut right here, and there's this perfect edge that the deer run. Like that's where I'm going to be at.
Yeah, that's the one thing for me. It's like, in these new pieces, that's the first place I'll go. It's like, because what you were saying earlier, where it's, I hunt a lot of flatland around here in Eastern PA, right? There's not very many places that I hunt that I get any type of significant, elevation change or whatever. And you're right, man, it's hard. Like, cause it's like they could be anywhere. Right. And so I really have to, what I'll focus on when I'm scouting a new piece is I'm just going to look to find the thickest, nastiest places. And then I'm going to get on the edge of that and I'm going to walk and I'm going to look for sign. Like, and that's kind of how I start to break down a piece around here, because I've tried other ways. And like, I prefer, I'm similar to you. It's like, I prefer hunting hill country because that's what I grew up hunting. And that's what I like to hunt. I like to hunt places that have big ridges, deep hollows. I like to get up on that, 2/3 of the way up the side of a ridge, you know what I mean? And hunt that area and just, down from the top, because I know that bucks like to cruise that area. Or I'll like to hunt a ridge top, as we're talking about. There's a place in Ohio that I have that on a piece of public that I love to hunt, that, I'm close to the ridge top and it's just always tore up with scrapes. And there's always bucks up there. Every year that I've hunted there, I've had good deer, up there. But so I've had a little bit of a transition here on the eastern part of PA, because like I don't really have any of that. And so I've had to really depend on finding edge and finding little ditches near swamps where like the water or the rain runoff is going to run into the swamp and create a little ditch and create, little pinch points between the ditch itself and the brush or the swamp and the edge of the swamp. And that's kind of where I've found some of my better setups, where, camera placements or, trees I'm going to hunt. And so it's been a little bit of a learning curve for me, but the edge for me has been key, and just that's always a really good starting point for me. But you'd mentioned, those deer coming into the bottom. So I want to get a sense from you, man. Like, I know you like hunting hill country and stuff like that, but do you try to avoid hunting the bottoms, just knowing that, it's hard to get a consistent wind, and the wind can be way fickle when you start to get into those bottoms? And do you prefer to try to stay up high and keep elevation so you can kind of control what your wind's going to do, or at least have a better sense of what your wind's going to do consistently?
Man, I normally go up high, and I'm not so sure that I hurt myself sometimes, because me and Greg were talking. This was last week or so. I'm like, man, I'm like struggling finding these beds. I'm struggling finding sign. I'm struggling finding deer. I don't know if it's because they're not there or they're dead. And he was just like, well, have you looked in the bottoms? And I was just kind of like, well, no, no, I haven't, man. I haven't. And, shame on me, but that's a good thing about having a buddy that you can kick ideas off with. But,
right,
man, the main reason I don't normally go to the bottoms is because, man, they can just walk anywhere.
Yep.
A lot of times there's no rhyme or reason. They're just cutting across that open ground, and it's more of a guessing game than it is up top.
Right.
You got to roll the dice a lot more when you're in the bottom than you do the top. But man,
Yeah.
I think that they do run them bottoms, especially if you got some food or water down there. I'm just not the best at hunting the bottoms. I'll say that.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny. It's, there's a couple pieces on a family property I've hunted a lot, and I used to like to hunt the bottoms because there was a ton of sign in the bottoms, but I would always get busted hunting down there. And I didn't start having like my best encounters until I started hunting some elevation. And then I started having way better encounters. And it's just, I was always playing, I was always behind the 8 ball trying to play the wind in those bottoms. And I was just kind of screwing myself to a degree. But it was always so attractive because I had put a camera down there, man. And just like you were saying, I would have just piles of deer stacked up on cameras in the bottoms all the time. And so I'd want to hunt the bottom. And then I would just, I would get blown up, or I wouldn't see deer, or they would win me because my wind would be wrong, or it would shift in the middle of the hunt, or whatever the case was, or it would shift back and forth during the course of the hunt. But I think it's cool, man, that you and Greg talk, man, because it's always good to have hunting buddies like that, man, to bounce stuff off of. Like, I certainly do it to him. That's for sure. He and I go back and forth, and he's actually been my archery sensei to a degree. Like, that's the guy who's kind of been my archery coach, if you will. He's kind of taken the past 2 years and really kind of helped me go from being a guy who shoots a bow to a guy who is an archer. So he's definitely a good dude.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think that there's a hunt involved will be lined up for him and I in the future sometime. Like, I think him and I are going to hit the field together sooner or later.
Nice. Well, I better be on that itinerary, dude. That's all I'm saying. I better be included in that. I think maybe something like you, Litzinger, me, rodeo. We'll get old Chad rodeo Sylvester down there and go somewhere and do a hunt.
So I need to elaborate on something on Chad. So me and Chad, we've kind of become really good friends, and we really bump some heads.
Do you now?
Like, I'm pretty sure we're both alphas. So when you put him and I together, it's just like we're constantly like running into each other all day. I'm like, man, you just try to keep up. And he's like, no, you try to keep up. So I would love to take Chad to a place, and I don't know if I could ever do it, but I'll admit it. Like, I would love to just run that guy on the
ground. I love it, dude. I love it. I'm literally going to text him when we get done here. Just be like, dude, the challenge has been thrown out, brother. Like, it's public. Like, you got to step it up.
It's public. Like, Chad Sylvester, like, I really don't think you can hang with me. And I just made it public. I really don't think you can hang with me. Even though your arms are bigger than me. I know, right? I don't think you can hang with me.
Dude, that dude could probably wake up and run like a 4.40. Like, he's just like a freak athlete. Like, I went we were hunting Ohio together last year, and a different, not deep southern Ohio, just more, in the central south. I guess people still consider it southern Ohio, but it's really kind of in the center. And my buddy Tate went with us. And Tate's I did a podcast with him, and Tate's kind of been, he's an older fella. He's a really good friends with my father-in-law, and he's the guy who really introduced me to bow hunting, and got me started really. And so, love that guy. He's like family. And love hunting with him. And so we went out to scout there. I guess it was a late winter, early spring the one year. And Tate was going with us because the three of us were going to go hunt together. And I warned him, and it'd be like going with you as well, as what I'm kind of finding out. And I told him, I was like, hey man, I was like, if you need to like lay back or whatever, don't feel like you need to keep up. I was like, cause dude, I was like, Chad's like a former, D1 football player, rodeo guy. I was like, and he's just one of those freak dudes that like could probably roll out of bed, bench press 250, and then run a 4.40. I was like, he's just like an athlete. I was like, he's a freak, and so he was like, okay, yeah. So we're going through the woods or whatever, and Tate's trying to keep up. And at one point we stop and I check on him, and I'm like, dude, what's going on? He's like, man, that boy just looks like he glides through the woods. He was like, his legs are so long. He's like, it's not even like he's on like the ground. He's like, it's like he's floating. I'm like, I know, dude. And I mean, he would hang a set like in that one area in Ohio. He was down, had a bunch of cameras out, and this is the southern Ohio piece. And he hung some sets, and some like basically they were just hung in like good spots that he knew like from year over year. And he was like, hey, I was planning to hunt this one area. He's like, if you want to go hunt over here, because I wanted to hunt this one ridge. He's like, I've already hung a set there. He's like, so you don't need to carry anything in. And I was like, all right, cool. I just happened to take a stick with me. I don't even know why I took one, but I took a stick with me and I got there, and I'm glad I did, because dude, he had those things so spaced out that I literally had to use a stick in between steps, or in between sticks, to get to it, because the guy's like 6'1", and he's like, at a 6'1", he's like 5'8" of legs. You know what I mean? I'm like all of 5'8". You know what I mean? So it's like I couldn't even, like, I had to put an extra stick up just to get into the freaking stand. But no, man, it's like I would love to hunt with you and Chad. That would be a good time. I feel fortunate that I have buddies like you, Chad, and Greg, and stuff like that. Not just from hunting, man, because you guys are just good people in general, man. So deer hunting in this podcast has given me more than I could ever ask for. That's for sure. As far as friends and buddies. So I appreciate you, man, and your friendship, and I hope one day we get to do some hunting together.
Oh, for sure, man. And just to elaborate, man, like, I've covered like various topics. You've done like a bunch of podcasts, but like what you and I are talking about like right now, man, that's what it's really about. And
That's
people
it.
need to realize that and not forget it. Like, this is why we do it.
Yep. 100%, man. I always say, man, like, find good hunting buddies that if you're a grinder, find good hunting buddies that like to grind like you, and don't let them go. No, whatever it is, if you have an argument about something, man, or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like, let that shit go and make amends, because good people like that aren't around every corner. You know what I mean? And so do what you can to hold on to those folks, and, your life will be richly rewarded because of it, So I don't know, man. I think that's probably a pretty good place to end, dude. I think that was a pretty poignant place to kind of wrap things up. What do you think?
Man, I feel good about it, and I just want to say, the same thing that I say to everybody, man, dude. Put your family and God first before you do anything, and the day that hunting becomes before your family or God, like, you're leaving the house and you're not even successful. So,
hear that.
Just something to stick in your hip pocket. And man, I feel like that's a wrap. I feel good about it, and I have fun. I appreciate you having me on and reaching out to me.
Yeah, man, you bet. Before I let you go there, man, why don't you let folks know where they can follow along with your season? Where can they find out more about Mr. Josh Profit?
Man, I'm not real involved in social media. All I got is Instagram, and you can find me there at BG_bowhunter. That's me. I'm pretty heavily active with Chad and them at Exodus Trail Cameras. We have a short film coming out with them here real soon that I'm pretty excited about. So that's where you can find me, brother.
Nice, man. Maybe when that comes out, we'll have to do a little chat again. Get Chad, old rodeo, on here, me, you, and him, and do a little round table and talk about the film and get that thing launched.
Oh yeah, him and I had some interesting conversations spending 2 days together. I'd love to get him on the other end of this line.
That's that, man. I will just be the instigator and let you two go and just hit record. It'd be great. I'd love it.
Oh yeah. I'm still going to take him down. I'm going to make that clear.
Right. I love it, dude.
It's going to happen.
That's got to be on film too. I'm going to film that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Nice. All right, man. Well, I'll let you get going, brother, man. Thanks for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon. Good luck to you this season. And man, we're always in touch. So I'll talk to you probably in the next couple of days.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Josh for joining. Be sure to give him a follow on Instagram and check out the video that he recently did with our friends from Exodus. You can find that on Exodus's YouTube channel. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. It would be super appreciative if you would do that for me. And before we shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Gumleaf USA Boots, Obsession Bows, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, Day 6 Gear, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.